What's up, everybody? It's Vice Games here, and we're back with another episode of Talkback Pokemon. This is the show where I ask you, the viewer, to write in or call in with a question and your thoughts and opinions, and I give mine back to you in reply. And so we've got, for the very first time, a live caller. So, live caller, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
I'd love to. Hi, YouTube. My name's Poke or Pokey. You can pronounce it either way you want. I am from Tennessee. It's currently 4 a.m. here. It's not great, but we're here.
Oh, those are gamer hours if I ever heard it. It is. You're gonna hear the birds chirping in a little bit. The sun's gonna creep up.
Went to bed at 7 a.m. last night. I'm ready for it.
Oh my gosh, dude. Oh my gosh. Well, look, I've got you here to ask me a Pokemon TCG related question. So what have you got for me? What's on your mind?
So I have an interesting question. What are your thoughts on how the Pokemon card game's currently, what direction it's going in? How do you like the way it's going? In particular, that's kind of a broad question. What's your thoughts on going back to EXs?
Yeah. So it is a pretty interesting topic at the moment because we are at a bit of a juncture when it comes to the card game. The design philosophy, which I feel like it started all the way back at the beginning of the Black and White block, where we got the massive Reshiram and Zekrom cards that had 120 HP. They did like over 100 damage each. It was crazy at the time, like how strong these cards were, and it kept taking this trajectory where the strength was really like centralized in the cards. If you look back at the Black and White base set, it is a very basic looking set, and it's kind of just been a theme that has continued for a very long time. And I feel like we're finally at a point, we're at like a turning point especially with Paldea Evolved and like new cards that keep getting revealed. And after the interview that they gave at Worlds last year, where they talked about how they want to bring back some of the things like, they want to bring back comeback mechanics, right? It's very interesting to think about it that way. And you could see it in the form of cards like Luxray and Reversal Energy and things like that. So I wrote out a pretty detailed response to your question, so I'll read that out. And what I wrote was, personally, I love the direction the game is taking. I understand that the game's development team laid out their design philosophy during an interview at Worlds last year and seemed to understand that players enjoy strategies that allow them to win from behind, or in effect like win by setting up a strong board which allows them to mount a comeback. So I would say that Gardevoir EX is a really good example of that. It means that decks which carry an identity that I find enjoyable, particularly ones whose strengths manifest on the board itself with an array of Pokemon, are becoming viable in a competitive setting. So, and I'll extrapolate on that a little bit. If you look at decks like Lost Zone Box, as long as that deck has one Pokemon in play, it can potentially just pull off anything. You can't say the same about a deck like Gardevoir, right? And there's like a few other decks that have very narrow boards by nature of the way that they're created. The really obvious example in my mind is Arceus Duraludon Umbreon at the moment, because it's just very few but tall Pokemon that you sit on the board, and their strength is kind of like housed in and of themselves, and each strong Pokemon that you've got on the board sort of come together to be a strong strategy together. But even if you took them away by way of knocking them out or whatever, it doesn't really like fall apart. They're still very strong Pokemon on their own. So just to continue, the reversion to EX Pokemon is sort of like a really welcomed simplicity in my mind, and it's a symbolic statement to say that they're looking back at what worked well with influence, and even like direct callbacks to cards from the past, which inspires some of the most cherished formats of the past too. So the fact that EX cards don't feature unique effects like their more recent predecessors allows them to sort of distribute the usefulness and the power of all the components of the deck, like across like different cards. Like they all have a different role. In a Gardevoir deck, you've got Curlier to draw cards. You've got like memory skip routes to get you out of tricky situations. You've got the Greninja. You got both Gardevoirs. You've got the Zacian. You know, you can get Gallade in there. It's very interesting to see the strength of the deck spread out across the board instead of being narrow and on like your singular Drowdon VMAX. Okay, so and so what all I've got to say, like, other than that, is that I hope that more EX Pokemon with abilities get printed, though limiting the usefulness to their non-EX counterparts to sort of like bring them up is really great too. So quite a long-winded answer, but like there's a lot to think about. And even earlier in the stream, I was talking about that a little bit as well. So I didn't even really give you an answer. Give you a chance to provide your own answer. But did you have thoughts that you'd like to share as well? Or maybe you just have like a positive or negative feeling attached to the cards that you're seeing now?
Yeah, I have a response I thought of. It's not gonna be as like detailed as yours because I'm obviously not as into Pokemon, the card game, as much as you are. I kind of agree with a lot of that though. I think like I've noticed a lot of times as someone who started playing in Sun Moon, you see these like really massively strong Pokemon like tag teams, like VMAXs, like V-Stars. Like look at like Mew VMAX in the deck. It's like if I out the Mews, I win or lose the game. You know? Like,
yeah.
Like they have like the draw stuff, like that. The entire fight's like, can I kill the Mews? Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely like agree with that. Like EXs kind of like spreads out the power a little bit in a weird way. Cause like all decks, even like before, still used like a ton of different Pokemon like as supports. But I like that it's not just out my one or two guys or lose. It's more of like fight my multitude of like my team of guys. I think it's a pretty cool direction. As for EXs, I like it. For formats like expanded, it's really cool because there's a lot of dead cards that just were not relevant that are now suddenly good again because EXs are now going. And I think it's kind of a way to like not curve it, but like it can kind of it could go into like a less power creep direction because EXs are just inherently less strong because you'd lose less prizes for them dying, but it's not just cheers by really two strong cards, you know? So yeah. I like the direction as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping that with the advent of cards like Reversal Energy and maybe more effects that make Stage 2 Pokemon a bit easier to get into play, that gap that sort of exists between them sort of narrows. Okay, so there's nothing inherently wrong with EXs, and the way that they've implemented them into the game by making them be part of the evolution paths of cards that are non-EXs is sort of what allows me to enjoy the identity that they have in the game. Unlike what you had with V-Stars, where you have V-Stars and V-Maxes and all the other cards are over here, and they're not really part of the game. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. You could just build a VMAX deck that only has VMAX cards in it. You know, so it was a little bit silly. But I like the direction of the game now. But anyhow, thank you so much for the question. I'm really glad that you were our first live call-in caller, because you've been around the stream for a really long time. So it was great to have you on. Yeah. And if you got another question, maybe we'll get you on again, and we can have another chat.
Good. That's not what I really thought about. I was like, I want to be on stream call. It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right.
I hope it goes. I hope the other callers, if you get other Discord callers or questions, I hope they go real well. For both the YouTube and the Twitch audience currently watching, I hope you guys, and also YouTube Vice, obviously, hope you guys are enjoying your day. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much, Pokey. We'll see you next time, yeah?
Bye, Vice.
Bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
So we've got our next caller. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Hey YouTube, I'm Emerald. I'm from India right now. I've just finished my lunch and I'm here with a Discord call with Vice.
Hey Emerald, it's so great to finally chat to you over Discord, because you've been a long time viewer of the YouTube and the Twitch here, haven't you? for ages.
Yeah. Yes. I joined Vice really. I think joined the Whooper gang really, and
Yeah.
last year April. Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
streaming.
Nico also, Whoopers in the chat right now watching live in Twitch.
That's true. Yeah. So I was streaming some Charizard theme deck gameplay, I think. No, I was streaming my Charizard deck and
Yes.
challenging
And it was,
people.
yeah, if you lose a match, I get a code. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I was pretty good at defending myself that stream. So yeah. Oh, okay. So Emerald, what's your question for me?
So my question was, many top players say they practice with different types of meta decks in order to understand how the setup works and where its limitations could be, even though they may be playing a different deck altogether for any tournament. What is your opinion on this strategy?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, what you're saying is top players practice with different types of meta decks, not just the deck that they intend to play, in order to understand like the setup, the limitations, and you're just asking me what my opinion is on the strategy. So, look, I think that it's a pretty sound strategy, because it's not just important to understand like what the turns look like for your deck, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, but also like what is your opponent trying to do, and what options do they have on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, etc. Right? You need to be able to understand what are the sort of ideas that they could potentially formulate. You need to try and figure out, all right, what ways can my opponent sort of lock down this game or come back from behind and win. If you don't have a good understanding of the meta decks and the types of lines of play that they have available to them, then you might miss out on counter strategies that you have available to yours. And so this comes into why it's not as simple as net decking in order to win a big event. You need to understand like what the matchup looks like on the board against a lot of the decks that you're playing against, and it can also sort of influence your deck creation process as well. Like you could be playing Gardevoir, but there's a lot of different ways Gardevoir can look, right? So yeah, I think that metagaming and deck building, I've made a video about this before actually, and it's about how deck building is like having a conversation. You have to like listen to what the metagame is saying, and then your deck has to be the reply. So you can't like seal yourself in a bubble and be like, I like this version of my deck and I don't care what the metagame looks like. You have to actually be aware of it, and it sort of informs, do I run 1 worker, 2 worker? Do I run 0 worker? Like what counts of cards, tech cards, do you run Echoing Horn or Canceling Cologne, cards like that. So what are your thoughts on that, Emerald?
Yeah, so my approach was not about being in the bubble with my deck. This
Yeah.
is the perfect. This has worked out in previous the very first regionals after the format. The meta has just begun after the cards have been released.
Yeah.
The trendsetters, it takes a bit of time. After that, do you continue to follow the trend? That was the thing. That is, I'm selecting this particular deck. I'm only going to play this deck. I'm also observing what others are playing.
Yeah.
That is, obviously I'm facing opponents who are playing different other decks.
Yeah.
Via through that I can get to know my experience, or I could formulate a game plan about what they are playing. Or is it better to have a experience by playing other decks by myself, or is it good enough to look at and judge what cards to include, what tech cards to include in our deck?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So is it enough? Is it like a better use of your time, perhaps, to just look at deck lists? That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. Deck list is one thing. on the other hand, you have like when we are playing IRL, right? Seeing opponents do the most they with their decks,
Yep.
right? We are playing only. Sorry, we are as an individual. We are playing only one deck. For example, I think recently you just moved on to Chain Power from Gardevoir, right? So you are focusing on Chain Power, and we were contemplating. I just read the conversations in Discord for whether to include picnic basket or canceling cologne.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So those conversations that I think helps you to decide by facing other matchups. You get to know whether to include what tech cards or how many of them you need.
Yeah. I think what it comes down to is that, and I've spoken about this like a few times tonight before starting the talkback segment, but there is only so much time that we have available to us. And so like everything has to be considerate of the fact that we have school and jobs and we got to sleep and we got to eat and we got to do our chores and things like that. So you've only got so much time that you can spend playing the deck that you're not planning to play in order to understand it, right? So I think what's reasonable is that you give every deck maybe a couple of games so that you've got that sort of understanding from that side of the fence, so to speak, to understand like what it is they're trying to achieve game to game. So look, thank you so much for your question, Emerald, and it's so great to have both you and Pokey on back to back longtime viewers of the stream from different eras of Vice games. So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Don't mind if I was stumbling in between. Yeah, thank you for having me on the call.
That's all right. It's very easy for me to forget that like being live on in front of a screen like this is kind of like normal for me now. But like for anybody else, it's so weird. It's so weird. Yeah. So don't even worry about it.
It's the first time for me that I'm not supposed to anyway.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Yeah. Cheers.
Catch you next time, Whopper Gang.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Emerald. Fantastic question about playing meta decks in order to understand them, even if they're not the deck that you're trying to play yourself. And there is truth to that. But also, you just got to consider that you can only do so much. You can only do so much. So I've got one more question, and I don't think that the person who asked it is here. So I'm just going to read out their question and give you my reply, and then that'll wrap up this segment. So here we go. This one comes from Rakor. They're another long-time viewer of the stream, so thank you so much for submitting your question. And Rakor asks, there is always a villain in each meta. So you take like Mew VMAX or ADP, for example. We've known you, so they're saying we've known you, as in me, as the rogue player, which, it is a moniker that I've earned by playing weird decks. But has there been a time in the TCG when the villain spoke to me and made you play the deck? And so, like, I think we've experienced it a bit tonight with the Gardevoir EX deck. It ticks all the boxes for a deck that I really enjoy playing. It just so happens that it is also a very strong deck in the meta. Here's my reply to them that I wrote out in the Discord. I said a few times, but the villain can be really cool sometimes, just like they can be in various media as well. So back in 2014, so 9 years ago or so, I won a city championship. That's what they were called before League Cups, with a deck called Excelgor Gothtel. Well, not called Excelgor Gothtel. It was composed of Excelgor and Gothtel. And it's quite a difficult and oppressive matchup for other decks to face because it was paralysis plus item lock. Really gross to play against. But otherwise, for me, it was like a really super cool deck to play. I felt it was like really awesome because it was like 2 different stage 2s and 2 different stage 1s, and there was all this stuff happening on the board, and things were looping and going back into the deck and then drawing back out and this, that, and the other. It was really, really cool. And like the lock was really strong, but it was like fragile as well. If you broke it, however you had to break it, it could fall apart. But yeah, I really enjoyed playing that deck. You know, sometimes I play the Villainous deck when I find that the format as a whole is kind of boring, kind of uninspired, and maybe I'll just play something really straightforward. So for a long time, I only played Volcanion EX when Steam Siege was a thing, when that deck was out. So it was like Steam Siege, and you had like Evolution, Starmie, and things like that. So it has a pretty boring identity as a deck. But sometimes I also sort of appreciate a boring identity when I just want to cruise with my games. So yeah. So sometimes I'll play the Villainous deck, but that's all right. That's all right. So anyway, thank you so much for the question, Rekor. And if you would like to be involved in the next Callback Vice Games Talkback Pokemon episode, took me a little while to remember the name of my own show, join us in the Discord. I'll put a link probably on the YouTube. Otherwise, just join us live, and I always have a link to the Discord there. So you can join us there and drop your question into the channel called Talkback Pokemon. And if I see it and I like it, I'll reply. And if you're here when I'm live on Fridays, I might even get you on for a call. So I hope you enjoyed this one. This was episode number 4. I hope to continue doing these for you. And yeah, if you like all things Pokemon cards, especially the fun part, maybe just hit me with a subscription on YouTube. Follow me on Twitch. And I'll see you in the next live stream or video. So take care and goodbye. See ya.